You can be loved and still feel out of place. Not because the love is fake, not because the person is wrong, not because you're ungrateful, more like something in you doesn't know where to put its hands. You're sitting inside a moment you once begged for: kindness, steadiness, effort, consistency. And instead of melting into it, you feel oddly tense, like you're wearing someone else's life. You smile at the right times. You say the right words. You show up. You keep the relationship moving forward. But internally, there's this quiet dissonance that makes you wonder what you're missing. Why do I feel distant when nothing is wrong? Why does healthy love feel unfamiliar? Why does it feel like I'm watching myself be loved instead of actually receiving it? Sometimes the feeling is subtle, like a low hum of discomfort. Sometimes it's sharp, like a sudden urge to pull away, to create space, to pick a fight, to find a flaw, to make the relationship make sense again by turning it into something you know how to navigate. Because the truth is, many people don't feel safest in love when love is stable. They feel safest when love is predictable in a different way. Predictable through tension, distance, chasing, proving, earning, managing over giving, shrinking, performing. So when real warmth arrives, it doesn't always feel like home. Sometimes it feels like a foreign country where you don't speak the language. And that's why you can feel like a stranger in love, even when love is real. If this is you, you know how confusing it is because the outside looks fine. No betrayal, no chaos, no obvious red flags. Just a relationship that's trying to be steady. But your body doesn't match the story. You overthink their tone. You reread texts for hidden meanings. You feel suspicious of calm, like calm is just the pause before someone changes their mind. You flinch when they praise you, not because you hate compliments, but because compliments raise a question you don't know how to answer. If they see me this positively, what happens when they see the parts of me I keep hidden? Or you go the other direction and feel numb. You're present, but not fully present. You care, but you can't access the warmth the way you think you should. You start worrying you're broken because the relationship is offering what you always said you wanted, and you can't feel the movie version of happiness. Then guilt crawls in, because guilt always crawls in when you can't perform gratitude for the thing you prayed for. You tell yourself you should be happier. You tell yourself other people would be thrilled to have this. You tell yourself you're dramatic. You try to force the feeling, and when you can't, you start quietly punishing yourself. Sometimes you punish yourself by trying harder. You become even more attentive, even more accommodating, even more good, because maybe if you do love correctly, it will finally feel right. Sometimes you punish yourself by withdrawing. You get colder, busier, less available, because distance is easier than the shame of not being able to receive. And the worst part is that you might not even recognize what's happening as an internal passage. You might interpret it as a relationship issue and start making decisions from fear, ending something good, chasing someone unsafe, returning to an old dynamic, or creating unnecessary conflict just to feel alive again. But what's actually happening most of the time is not that the love is wrong. It's that your identity inside love is shifting. And identity shifts can feel like emotional vertigo. Because when you've lived as a certain version of yourself for a long time, even a better version can feel unfamiliar at first. Especially in relationships where the old you learned very specific rules for staying safe. Rules like, Don't need too much. Don't want too much. Don't expect too much. Don't relax. Don't trust ease. Don't be fully seen. Don't be the one who gets left. When love starts becoming stable, those rules don't disappear politely. They panic because they think stability is the moment you'll finally get hurt. So they try to keep you in what you know. They try to keep you in the old identity that survived. There's a quiet reality most people don't name. Not all discomfort in love is a warning. Sometimes discomfort is a sign you're outgrowing a self. Sometimes the relationship isn't triggering you because it's dangerous. Sometimes it's triggering you because it's different. And different can feel like danger to a nervous system trained by repetition. This is why people can crave intimacy and fear it at the same time. Not because they're contradictory, because their inner world is holding two versions of reality at once. The version that wants closeness, and the version that learned closeness comes with a cost. So the moment closeness becomes real, the old self shows up like an alarm. It starts asking questions that sound logical, but are actually protective rituals. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? It starts scanning for flaws because flaws give it permission to retreat. It starts craving intensity because intensity feels familiar. It starts turning your partner into a test because tests keep you from surrendering. And at some point you realize the deeper truth. You don't only need a good relationship. You need a self that can live in one. This is where identity, phases and self-concept shifts becomes the lens that dissolves shame and replaces it with pattern recognition. Because identity shifts don't just happen in careers or spiritual awakenings. They happen in love. They happen when you stop being the chaser, when you stop being the fixer, when you stop being the performer, when you stop being the one who earns belonging by disappearing. They happen when you start receiving. And receiving requires a new self. So what you're feeling may not be a sign to leave. It may be a sign that your old relational identity is dissolving. And you're standing in the uncomfortable space between who you were in love and who you're becoming in love. That in between can feel like being a stranger, because you can't fully return to the old self without betraying your growth. And you can't fully inhabit the new self yet, because it hasn't stabilized. That's not failure. That's a passage. And passages always feel unstable while you're inside them. Identity phases are ancient human knowledge, even if we only recently started calling them self-concept. Older cultures understood that people don't simply upgrade themselves in private. They cross thresholds. They leave one role behind and enter another. And that crossing has emotional cost. Rites of passage traditions across the world made the in-between visible. They created liminal space, time outside ordinary life, where the old identity could be stripped away and the new identity could be formed. The discomfort wasn't treated as evidence something was wrong. It was treated as evidence something was changing. Later, developmental psychology described the same truth in a different language. Identity consolidates through stages, and those stages involve tension, disorientation, and reorganization. You don't become a new self without the old self grieving its loss of control. You don't integrate a new role without feeling clumsy inside it at first. That clumsiness is not a defect. It's how adaptation feels in a human body. Now apply that to relationships, And you can finally name why love can feel strange when it's healthy. Because many people didn't build their relational identity around being loved. They built it around surviving love. They built it around managing another person's moods. They built it around earning approval. They built it around being low maintenance. They built it around being needed. They built it around staying ahead of abandonment by never asking for too much. So when a stable partner arrives, or when a long-term partner becomes healthier, more consistent, more emotionally available, the old identity loses its job. And unemployment for an identity feels like death. It doesn't say, "Oh, great, we can relax now." It says, "We're about to be exposed." So it creates familiar roles. It tries to turn you back into the one who proves, the one who chases, the one who fixes, the one who over-explains, the one who performs good, so nobody can leave. You can see this in real life everywhere. You see it in the person who leaves chaotic relationships and finally meets someone steady. At first, it feels like relief. Then the mind starts calling it boring. Then they start craving the old push-pull because their identity only knows how to feel in love when it's anxious. They're not addicted to toxicity as a moral failure. They're addicted to familiarity as an identity pattern. You see it in friendships too, especially after growth. Someone heals, starts setting boundaries, stops overgiving, stops being the emotional dumping ground, and suddenly they feel like a stranger in their own friend group. The old role was the one who holds everyone. When they stop holding, the group reacts. Some friends adjust, some friends punish, and the person feels guilty for changing, even though the change is what saved them. That's identity shift in relationship form. You didn't just set a boundary, you changed the version of you people were used to accessing. You see it in long-term partnerships, when one person begins to mature emotionally. They stop stonewalling. They stop disappearing. They start taking accountability. They start offering real repair. And instead of instant bliss, both partners can feel destabilized because the relationship was organized around the old pattern. The one who chased now doesn't know who they are without chasing. The one who avoided now doesn't know how to be without distancing. The love is improving, but the identities are lagging behind, trying to catch up to a new rhythm. You can see it culturally in how modern dating can keep people stuck in old identities. Endless options reward the version of you that stays lightly attached, always ready to pivot. Deep love requires the opposite: staying, learning, repairing, being seen. So when someone finally meets a person who could actually build a life with them, the culture-trained identity panics. It calls depth pressure. It calls consistency suffocation. It calls commitment loss of freedom. Not because freedom is bad, but because the old self equates commitment with captivity. This is why you feel what you feel. Because your love life isn't only about who you're with, it's about who you are when you're with them. And right now, that who is changing. So how do you move through this without sabotaging the very thing you asked for? You begin by refusing to confuse unfamiliar with unsafe. That doesn't mean you ignore red flags. It means you stop treating your nervous system's discomfort as automatic truth. Ask a better question. Is this discomfort a warning about their behavior? Or is it grief from my old identity losing control? That distinction changes everything. You also stop demanding that receiving feel instantly natural. Receiving is a skill. It's not a personality trait. If you were trained to earn love, receiving will feel exposed at first. So you practice small receptions instead of dramatic surrender. You let a compliment land without deflecting. You accept help without apologizing. You allow your partner to care for you without rushing to repay it immediately. Each time you do that, you teach your identity a new rule. Love can be given without danger. Then you name the moment in honest language, not in accusatory language. Instead of turning your internal dissonance into a relationship indictment, you give it a truer sentence. I notice I feel strange when things are calm. I'm learning how to receive this. That kind of truth protects the bond because it doesn't make your partner the enemy of your transition. You also practice staying through the urge to create chaos. Many people generate conflict when the relationship gets quiet, because quiet feels like standing in open space. If you feel the urge to pick, test, accuse, or withdraw, treat it as an identity symptom. Your old self is trying to reclaim familiarity. You don't need to obey it. You need to hold it gently and choose a different behavior. A slower conversation, a pause before texting, a breath before reacting, a request for reassurance without turning it into a trial. And you build small rituals that stabilize the new self. Identity consolidates through repetition. That might be a weekly check-in that isn't a performance review, a shared walk that reconnects bodies, not just minds, a habit of telling the truth early before distance grows, a boundary around overstimulation so your nervous system can recognize calm as safe. Finally, let some relationships adjust around you. Identity shifts change the social environment. Some people will meet you at the new level. Some people will resist. That doesn't mean you're arrogant. It means the old you was part of an ecosystem, and ecosystems react when the role changes. Your job is not to return to the old self to keep the environment comfortable. Your job is to become who you are and let what can hold that remain. This is how you stop feeling like a stranger in love, not by forcing certainty, by letting the new self become familiar through lived proof. And when this starts settling, the first change is internal. Before, you lived with a quiet split. Part of you wanted the love. Part of you didn't trust it. You analyzed everything. You tested. You braced. You performed. You kept one foot out the door emotionally, not because you didn't care, but because the old identity believed that commitment equals vulnerability, and vulnerability equals pain. After, you begin to feel a different inner climate. Calm starts appearing in small pockets. Trust grows, not as blind faith, but as nervous system evidence. I can receive and not be punished. Clarity returns because you stop confusing old fear with present truth. Self-respect deepens because you stop abandoning yourself to stay safe, and you stop abandoning good love to stay familiar. Transformation is internal first. The relationship becomes steadier because you become steadier inside it. Not perfect, not always comfortable, but real. And one day you notice something quiet and shocking. You no longer feel like you're impersonating someone who deserves love. You feel like yourself. That's how you know the identity phase is integrating. You didn't just find better love. You became someone who can live in it. If you're honest, where do you feel out of place in love right now? Receiving care, trusting consistency, believing compliments, letting someone stay close, or not performing for approval. What would change if you treated that discomfort as an identity phase and practiced one small act of receiving this week? Healthy love doesn't feel scary because it's wrong. It feels scary because your old self can't survive there. And the moment you stop obeying familiar fear, you finally become a person who can stay. If this episode named your experience, share in the comments what part of love feels most unfamiliar to you right now, and what receiving without performing would look like in your real life. Subscribe for more episodes that translate relationship confusion into pattern recognition, so your growth doesn't cost you the very connection you've been praying for.